How's it going? I'm Edwin. I'm going to be teaching you about Pebble development over the next quite few tutorials. So, someone on YouTube inspired me to create these tutorials on Pebble development to create apps for the Pebble smartwatch. By the way, if you already know what all this is, you can skip this. I will leave an annotation in the video. Um, so the Pebble smartwatch, if you're not aware of what it is a smartwatch for iOS and Android. So that means it will run on iPhone, Android, or like iPhone, Samsung, Nexus, etc. As long as your phone has Android 4.0 or higher, so you can see this in the About section of your phone in the settings screen, you can write Pebble apps. And you should have a Pebble as well because there's not a simulator at this point in time. So Pebble has an open SDK, which means that you can write your own apps for it. So they have this beautiful developer site here where they have all the documentation, community resources, and whatnot. So since I'm doing this on a Mac, I'm going to be doing this through Sublime Text and Terminal. You can also do this on Windows. So to set up the SDK, I'm not going to show you this whole process, but basically you can go to developer.getpebble.com and go through specific instructions for your OS. If you're using Windows, in that case, that's fine. You'll be using cloudpebble.net, which is a great tool built by Catherine Berry. It's an online IDE, so you can write here. So, for example, I can write on this computer, and I can log off and everything, go to another computer, log in with my Pebble account, and have all my projects right here. So ever since I got my Mac, I've moved on to the terminal, but it's really great, and I've written tons of apps in it. So if you're not familiar with Cloud Pebble, you can sort of get a feel. Once you've created a project, you can run it, download the PBW, see the build log if there are errors or whatnot, or if you want to see what's going on. Your install button, app logs, screenshot. We'll look over all this later. GitHub, of course, will look over everything here. I'll be back to Cloud Pebble. I won't leave you guys in the blank. So a little bit about myself. Again, you can skip this. I'll leave an annotation. I'm Edwin Finch. So I'm a 16-year-old developer in Canada, and Pebble was my main platform that I picked up software development in. I started writing apps last January, and I just got hooked. This app was actually my first one right here, and then I built the Game Boy one, and it just went on from there. So I've made over 30 Pebble watch faces and apps, some for clients that aren't released. So on my website, you'll see less than 30. But yeah, I love Pebble, and yeah, so it's a great OS, great community, and there's really a lot for you to work with here. All right, so now to get into the SDK. So to get here, I expect you have the SDK already installed on your OS. Once you do, open up a terminal tab. So here we have terminal, and sorry, I'm new to video recording, so you can you should probably create a directory for your projects. So I've created one called Pebble Projects. And then you're going to want to, Pebble has a ton of commands already ready for you. So new project, convert project, build, clean, analyze size. We'll be going over some of these in later on in the tutorial. So what you're going to want to do first is do Pebble new project. Oh, sorry. You need a name for it. So you can also use these tags. So simple, JavaScript, worker, like if you want to add a background worker, I'll be going into that later. And I know, sorry, there's a lot to cover, so I can't, go over everything, single little detail right now. So you're going to want to give it a name, so we'll just go hello world. And so it's created the project, and we can see now that in my list of projects here, it's right here. So oh, sorry, capital H. So now we're in my Hello World project, and Pebble has set you up with a Pebble has set you up with a basic folder here. So here's your main app directory. On Cloud Pebble, I'll just keep this tab open. On Cloud Pebble, it's very similar, except it's broken into columns here on the side. So you have your resources. This is where you can put fonts and images, and you have your source files. So this is where you put your code. And sorry for the ugly code. This is from a while ago, even though my code is still probably pretty ugly. So your source is where you put all your code. So here, Pebble's already put simple hello world.c file for us right here with a simple click handlers and whatnot. We'll be going over that in a second. And then back here in your resources folder, this is where you'd put images and whatnot. So what I generally do is create a new folder for images, new folder for font, and then here is where you link them. So in your app info, this is a JavaScript object notation format. So here, basically on Cloud Pebble, it's in a very simple interface. You have your settings, and that's your appinfo.json, and it's very well laid out here. So we'll go over all these in Cloud Pebble. It's easier. So you have your project name. This is just for Cloud Pebble. Your app kind, so you can pick watch face or watch app. In the code, if you want a watch face, you're going to have to turn this to true. In Cloud Pebble, you have your short app name. So this is what's going to show up on your Pebble. So you can just write spoken here, and it'll just show up one word. Because of Pebble's limited screen size, obviously you're not going to be able to fit a whole sentence on here. Long app name, you can fit a longer name for your what they'll see on the phone. Your menu image, whatever you've defined in resources here, you can use as your menu image as long as it's 28 by 28. And then your company name. So I just put my name. If you are working for a company, you put your company. Version label. This is supposed to be major.minor. So you can't have bug fix anymore. You can't have bug fix and extension. You just have to do major and minor. This is for automatic app upgrades. We won't really be covering that, but basically with every version you incremented a code, and if it's major then you go like this, and when it's on the Pebble App Store it'll detect whether or not a new version is available for the user, and it'll automatically upgrade them without the user having to do anything. Your app UUID here, you shouldn't really be toying with this. It's generated on every build, so basically it's a unique fingerprint for your app. No other app will have a key like that unless you copy another app's key in here, which you probably shouldn't do. Your PebbleKit.js message keys. So this is where later on in tutorials we'll be exploring this more, but basically this is for communicating with your phone. So if you want to, whether temperature key, for example, you type whatever variable key name you want here with the ID that's associated from JavaScript. Here are just a few other options. Check JavaScript. I believe this is just for Cloud Pebble. You can, yeah, it is just for Cloud Pebble. You can make Cloud Pebble check your JavaScript code in real time, so you can see errors before you compile or before you run it. Check here if you're using location, and check here if you're using configurable. Refill over here. If we need configurable and whatnot, I'll be going over that later, but here your media goes, so you put this in the array, and yeah, we'll be covering that later. Sorry for saying that a lot. So yeah, now let's dive into a little bit of code. So in our Hello World project, we'll be going on for, we'll be using Sublime Text now instead of Cloud Pebble. In our Hello World project, we have some very basic elements already set up for us. And I want you guys to, as you're going through this tutorial, name things as your own variables. Try to, change it up a little. Don't just be watching my video and insert your own stuff, because that's just a bad habit, and then you're not really learning anything. I did that early on, and I ended up just going back to all my old code and copy pasting, and it was just a bad habit. I didn't end up learning anything, but luckily I've changed. And so basically what's going on here, it might seem confusing to new programmers. If you are new, you should probably get a little bit of experience in C. That's the language that we're going to be writing in for this tutorial. Pebble.js users, we're not, or developers. I'm not a JavaScript developer by any means. I suck at it, so I'm not going to be covering that at all. If you don't have any experience in C, you should probably go and look up a few tutorials, maybe spend a few days on it, get comfortable with it, because we're going to be covering, I'm not going to be covering pointers and, going over the whole logic and everything. I'm sort of going to expect you to know all of that. Okay, let's go from bottom to top. So here's your main function. This is going to run run once in your app. And for every app, you're basically going to want to have it set up the same. So int main, you're passing in void. You don't need this in here. Int main, so it's passing back an integer, which you don't need to worry about. It's calling init, which is the function here we'll talk about in a second. And then it runs this app log. So logging, what we talked about earlier, is what you can see. What you can see from the Pebble. So I don't have this set up right now, but you can see live logs from the Pebble if you do this. And then you have your app event loop. You need to call this in your main function after you've initialized elements. Your app event loop basically runs through core functions like your tick handle, register, tick handlers, Bluetooth, etc. And then after that, once the user closes your app, closes your watch face, then it will go to dinit. So whatever you need to run here to close your app, let's say you're saving data, destroying elements, etc., you would put that below app event loop. So just to recap, above event loop is create, event loop is what happens in the middle, and then dinit is after the user closes your app. All right, so up to init. Basically here, it's saying, okay, call init. We have window. It's going to create a window with this function. It's returning a pointer. And then we're setting our click config provider. So basically, we're setting what we want the window to do with each button. And then we're setting our window handlers. So load is when the window is loaded. So when it's pushed onto the screen, it's that little animation when you select an app. Unload is when it's closed. So these processes, you don't have to define them both by any means. You can just have load, or you can, you should obviously have load every time, because you're not going to be using unload, because then you'll have double pointer issues. But anyway, so then you don't have to create a special boolean here. You can just say true. So basically what it's doing is it's taking the window that's created, and then it's pushing it to the stack, and it's animating it. So you can change this to false. That won't work for watch faces, but you can change that to false if you want to not animate a window on an app. That can be handy in some cases, but we'll look into that if we need it. So window load here. This is pretty easy as well. It's right here. It's creating a local layer called window layer, and it's creating that layer by getting the root layer of the window. So the core layer is basically like what you're going to be drawing on top of with all your other layers that you want to add to that window. So then it's also grabbing the bounds of that window, so the rectangle. So grect is simply a rectangle with a x, y coordinate and a width and a height. Then it's saying create this text layer with a grect, so with a rectangle, of origin 072, so 0x72y, and it has a size of the bounds width, so the window layer's width size. I'll just enable zooming here. So it has the bounds width and then 20 height. It's then setting the text to press a button, and you can change this to whatever you want. And then it's also setting the text alignment to gtext alignment center. So there's also a bunch of different gtext alignments. So there's gtext alignment left and right, and we'll be learning more about how to use that in the future. So layer add child. So it's adding that created text layer to the window layer. So it's drawing that on top. So back up here to your click config provider. Basically, this is called when in init here. See, when you set it to the window, and this needs to happen in init generally. I guess there are special cases where you can have it otherwise, but it's best practice to have it on before you actually push the window on the stack. So it's setting the click handlers. Here we have our select click handler, that's a function. And then, so button ID select, there's an ID for every button. There's even back. You can override the back button so that the user can't exit the app, for example, but they still can by long pressing the back button for a few seconds. That's generally not a good idea, but in some cases you need it. For example, I created an app for a client where it was for children, so I had to override the back button so they couldn't just exit the app. So it's just subscribing to, for example, select. So let's just go over select. Select click handler goes here, and this is basically what each one does. Select click handler passes in a click recognizer ref, and the context, which is void. You generally don't need to use these. You just need the actual function to be called. So here the function is called, and remember how to set text layers text. So it's setting text layers text to select. It does this for every button. So see, the up click handler sets it to up. The down click handler sets it to down. And so yeah, you can run this. So if you're using an Android phone, you can go into settings on the Pebble app, go into developer connection, and you enable that. And then on the sidebar, there's a developer option above the settings tab. And in that, I'm sorry I don't have an actual screen to show you right now. I don't have a camera. I will get one soon. And in that, you'll find your IP address. If it isn't showing, just disable it, enable it, make sure you're on Wi-Fi. Sometimes network providers don't allow share connection, so this might not work for you if you're like on a strict school network or whatnot. So you're going to want to set that IP address to the Pebble phone environment variable. So this is just going to set it temporarily into the terminal session you're in now. So if I close this terminal window after I set this, it'll forget it and you'll have to enter it again. To be honest, I'm not sure how to permanently set it. I don't know if you can. So once you've done this, it'll just go to new line. Pretty straightforward, pardon me. So then to build a project, you just type Pebble build. And it runs through the whole process here. And you look like master hacksaws, I guess. And so then you don't just want to build your project, you want to install your project. So we're going to go Pebble install. And if you want to see logs, so remember at the beginning there we had a little app log down here that said it's done initializing and it pushed the Windows pointer. We can type --logs for a flag, --logs, and see what's going on live. Okay, basically, sorry about that. I just had some issues timing out there and stuff because of my home network, and then my Pebble was full and it crashed. So here we've got our Pebble. So here we've got our Pebble with our demo app here. So you can see our click handlers are registered, and select, down, and up. And as you can see, the back button just closes it. So back here on the computer, you have your logs. So here is basically where it shows everything that's going on in your watch if you have a log, if you have called app log function. Oops. So basically, it's initializing, it's pushed this Windows, it's just telling you the pointer. It also, here, if you're curious, it's saying the total size. This is how much available you have for your heap, your use, so how much memory you've allocated, and then how much you still have allocated after your app has run through DNet and everything, and has hit the end of main. So this is generally a good telltale to see if your app is memory efficient and whatnot, but you're not really going to need that very often. So you can, to exit that, you can just press Control-C, or if you're on Cloud Pebble, go back to the compilation tab. So yeah, basically here on Cloud Pebble, you just go compilation. Okay, some serious issues. Alright, and that is my first Pebble tutorial. I'm sorry it was a little rough around the edges of my first tutorial. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.